We do thank you for coming for this report on what has been happening in the last month since the City of San Marino incorporated. And I certainly welcome you here to the Stoneman Ranch, Los Robles Ranch. As you know, the general was given this property from the only street down from Pasadena, Oak Knoll, to the South Pasadena city limits. And until his death in 1897, 16 years ago, and today, when his widow is still maintaining the oranges and avocados here, the Stoneman Ranch has been one of the bigger producers of fruit for export, including some tremendous new avocados, a new type of fruit that has been brought to California by the Pompano kids up in Altadena. They brought these specimen trees about 10 years ago in 1903, 1904, and they are the first producing California avocados. I presume most of you came here tonight to the Stoneman Ranch by the red cars down the street. So I didn't see anyone going out to move the horses, but I hope our petunias are left. General Stoneman has been gone now these 20 years, but he would not be happy to have his flowers eaten. He wasn't too happy a fellow most of the time. You may know that in the Civil War, the first two battles he took part in, he managed to lose, so that they made him quartermaster. And of course, being quartermaster was an excellent way to get your cut of the various payments that were made for supplies for the Army. After the war, he had come onto Arizona as the commander of Arizona Territory before he was given this ranch by the railroad people that also made him governor and railroad commissioner for a number of years. It is rather sad that the general had applied for wartime relief during the Civil War. He did have a problem, an injury, and filed a claim for medical payments of over $8,000 for his injuries suffered in the war. But General Grant, when he became president, decided that General Sherman's hemorrhoids were not qualified for a wartime injury, so that was denied him. However, he did manage to make enough money, and right now, in 1913, Myron Hunt and Associates are building the new ranch house for Mrs. Stoneman that is directly in front of you, behind me. You might want to take a look at it on your way out. The house is about half finished at this point. Don't think it's one of Myron Hunt's most dramatic designs. There's a couple of kids up on the hill who've been building houses, the Green brothers that you may have heard of, that I think are doing much better work than Myron Hunt. But this is an interesting Myron Hunt house. One problem with the Stoneman house behind me is that they aren't quite sure whether this new electric light power is going to last. They have wired it for electric lights in each of the rooms, very modern electric lights where you touch a button and the lights will go on. But just in case electric power is not here to stay, they have also installed gas pipes and gas nipples in all of the walls. Behind each of the light fixtures, there are gas nipples where a gas fixture can be hooked up. It's an interesting house. Take a look at it. But I do welcome you to know a little more about what is happening here in our newly incorporated city of San Marino. You are aware that the election was held April 12th of this year. According to the Pasadena Star, there were 175 registered voters in San Marino. According to the Pasadena Post, there were only 110 registered voters. The Pasadena daily papers, the three of them, never do agree on facts. However, the vote seems accurate. There were 97 votes cast. 93 of those approved the incorporation. You will remember, of course, the issue is that both Alhambra and Pasadena, our two incorporated neighbors north and south of us, have been looking rather enviously at the property valuations here. Alhambra has been charging 80 cents per resident per $100 assessed valuation on their homes. And there are a few homes there that are $900, $1,000. And to pay 80 cents per year per $100 in taxes is much more than we in San Marino wanted to do. Pasadena, on the other hand, has been charging 85 cents per 100. Here in San Marino, our new City Board of Trustees has determined it will cost 50 cents per $100 of assessed valuation now that we are incorporated. That would mean the average house here, most of your homes, will require payments of between $9 and $12 per year in property taxes. You may be aware there's a problem. Because our incorporation was on April 12, and we did not officially get our charter and open for business until April 25, we are too late to file with the county for them to collect the property taxes. So our Board of Trustees, I understand some cities call them city councils, but here in San Marino it is officially under the charter a Board of Trustees, are asking each of you residents to voluntarily send a check for 50 cents for every $100 valuation on your home. Mr. Huntington has valued his own home at $8,000. We have not received his check, but the president of our Board of Trustees, General George S. Patton Sr., he is officially president. Again, in a few towns they call him mayor, but here he is designated as president. He has promised to talk to his friend Henry Huntington and see if a donation can be made to the city. General Patton has offered his front office room for the first city council meetings, and they met there last week, May 13th, 1913. The council members, Grondike and Lacey and Valentine and Hart, plus President Patton, were all there. Patton's son, you may know, has stayed in Europe. Young Georgie, the kid that they had so much trouble with in various schools around here because he never quite learned how to read, so that his father finally taught him orally the lessons. You know, of course, that last year George Jr. participated in the Olympics at Stockholm, and particularly in the pentathlon, where Patton was #1 until it came to the pistol shooting. Most of the pistol shots at the pentathlon last year, 1912 Olympics, were done with .22s. But young Georgie Patton insisted on using a .38 caliber revolver. He placed 5 shots, 4 of them dead center into the bullseye. The 5th shot they could not find whatsoever, though most of the observers who've told me about it indicate that probably Patton was so good a shot, the 5th .38 caliber went right through one of the other 4 holes, and he should have won that pentathlon, but he did not. He has stayed in Europe this summer as an officer of the U.S. Cavalry. He is working on a new saber called the M1913 Saber with a special twist to it that he wants to use for the American forces, which mostly are encamped along the Texas-Arizona border, concerned about some of the revolutionary activities that have been happening the last 3 years down in Mexico. But anyway, it's the senior Patton, our Patton. Georgie may never amount to much. And the other city council members have also rented space in a home just behind you here, at the corner of Oak Knoll and Lopez Lane. You're aware, of course, that Oak Knoll is a north-south street now that is partially paved until you get down to the Wentworth Hotel. Mr. Leonard, the owner of the Wentworth, so far has refused to pay it any further than the top of the Oak Knoll Hill. Los Robles, meanwhile, is also partly oiled, at least in the summertime, partway through. But going to the east, unless you go down to Huntington Drive, the only way you can get through the orange groves is on Lopez Lane. It begins just over here at Oak Knoll and heads east toward the Huntington properties. A problem has come up already to our town. Monterey Road, which, as you know, starts in South Pasadena and comes toward us, crosses the South Pasadena city limits on Garfield, then Monterey turns south and just follows the bed of the arroyo, of the wash. It's the borderline between here and South Pasadena. It goes through the Thaddeus Lowe estate. Thaddeus Lowe, the famous builder of the Mount Lowe Railroad and the Civil War telegrapher. Thaddeus himself doesn't particularly care, but his son-in-law, a fellow named Dobbins, has already filed a claim against this 1-month-old city of San Marino to get the street abandoned, to get the Monterey Road heading south toward Alhambra to be abandoned. And this is a concern. Thaddeus Lowe also volunteered to his friend President Patton of our Board of Trustees to be the official recorder. And there is some question of the minutes of the City Board of Trustees meeting already. One part of it indicated, this is the meeting, the first organizational meeting of May 13th. One part says that Monterey Road shall be kept open to the public, but then in Thaddeus Lowe's notes you will find it says no, that they voted not to close it, which is a little bit of a discrepancy there. You should be pleased that the city has started making some improvements already. The first act was to hire a city attorney. City attorneys, they found, are quite expensive as well as somewhat unnecessary. But the first thing they did was to feel we needed a city attorney who delivered a 6-page, single-spaced, typewritten report that basically says that there is no need to adopt Robert's Rules of Order for the city because there is no requirement for any rules or orders for our Board of Trustees meeting. Also, the city attorney had to rule on whether we needed to bid on street improvements. Now, here the city attorney did us a favor. He ruled that since San Marino is a small community, no one will notice whether we put things out for bid or not. And he collected his $40 per month for these opinions. We have hired a street superintendent. This is a working superintendent. He will be paid $150 a month. However, he must furnish his own automobile. He has purchased for $4,000 of our dollars, if you send along your voluntary contribution, he's already purchased a roller, a grader, a disc harrow, 2 oil wagons, a plow, and 9 mules. The problem to improve our streets, of course, are laborers. Right now, the city is hiring about 12 men during spring and summer of 1913. Those that are American citizens are to be paid $6 a day. If an American citizen brings his team in order to help, they will get $16.50 a day. The city is also paying $2.50 a day for Mexican and Indian workers. Just pretty good pay, I think you will agree, especially for our Mexican and Indian friends from south of Las Tunas, You know that Las Tunas still continues down there. Las Tunas is the row of tuna plants, of cactus plants. There are so many tuna plants that they grow together to make a fence. This is rather fortunate for us because our good neighbors in San Gabriel, those who are south of Las Tunas, the Indians who are not taxed, and some of our Mexican friends can stay south of the borderline of cactus, which is broken only in a few places, such as the new country club, 10-year-old country club there, which does have a couple of holes in Las Tunas, but I understand they have guards at night to keep any of the Indians and Mexicans from coming up here into San Marino, I hope. The first city council meeting a week ago did receive a bid to hire a new marshal. The marshal will serve for $50 a month, and they have bought him a used Indian for $80 a month to help the marshal. I was a little confused at first as to what a used Indian is. That's what it says. But one of our young kids pointed out to me, as you youngsters probably know, that an Indian is, of course, one of the best kinds of motorcycles. So our marshal will now be tooling around town on a used but very good Indian motorcycle. Actually, during the course of 1913, we're going to encounter 3 different marshals. One of them fell off the used Indian, and since he was injured on duty, and there is no such thing as workers' comp as a few of these socialists want to bring in, he was paid off the rest of the month, his full $150 salary for the month, even though he only worked a week and a half, and he has been dismissed. Few good things. We are receiving fire protection from our neighbors in Alhambra. Anyone summoning Alhambra, they will send their fire department up here on a volunteer basis. However, every resident must pay if there is a fire call. We've had one so far in the history of our city. The owner of the house that burned had to pay $21.10, and our friend, the city attorney, has ruled there is absolutely no liability to the city of San Marino or to the city of Alhambra because their trucks came on a volunteer basis. Another issue that came before the city council this month has been about a night watch company, a patrol company that has organized on Windsor Road in a home there. And they have offered to come around the city on their motorcycles to patrol when the marshal is off duty. The city council approved this, but said there may be no signs. Now, there was one member in the council who insisted no signs. The rest of the council thought that a small sign out in front might be appropriate, but the vote was unanimous in that the one marshal apparently agreed that we could put a small sign in front of homes. Another problem in San Marino right now are mealybugs. Some of you have orchards. You know that there's been an infestation of mealybugs, and there are 2 companies officially licensed by the city to spray. But maybe the biggest pest problem comes from Wilson Lake. Those of you who've been past Wilson Lake know that it's virtually a swamp. Wilson Lake is full of mosquitoes, but our city board of trustees has taken action. They've written a polite but official request of Mr. Huntington to please clean up his lake. So far, there's been no reply. Mr. Huntington's Pacific Electric have 9 grade crossings along Huntington Drive, which is double track, and 4 grade crossings along the Oak Knoll line that branches off just below here and comes up across Lopez Lane and into Pasadena. All of these grade crossings are not only illegal, but also very dangerous. They were never approved because they were built in unincorporated land, and he never bothered to file anything with the State Railroad Commission, headed by Governor Stoneman, who, of course, lived here on the property that had been given to him. But our City Board of Trustees has now taken this in hand and has written a letter again to Mr. Huntington to please do something about the dangerous grade crossings and the excessive speed of some of his railroad trolley cars. Speed is a problem. I understand from the marshal that several autoists have been going along Huntington Drive burning. If you are an autoist, you should be aware that there is no burning allowed now under the ordinance of San Marino. Burning is described as moving an auto faster than 20 miles an hour. And I think some of you may be guilty of burning along Huntington Drive. The council has sent a letter to Mr. Huntington requesting him as a member of the Automobile Club of Southern California to post Huntington Drive between Granada and Rose Road, no burning, 20 miles an hour. Now, there are several other ordinances being discussed that will please our posterity. If there are any city council members in the future who think we don't have ordinances about everything, an ordinance is now on the books in the last week regarding the discharge of firearms in the city. Firearms can only be discharged during daylight hours and only for pests, varmints, or of course Indians and Mexicans. There is a new ordinance regulating the keeping of cows and domestic fowl. You must keep your cows away from your neighbors by at least 1,000 feet, and all domestic fowl must be caged from now on. We have a new ordinance prohibiting handbills within the boundaries of the city of San Marino, and probably the one that pleases me most, an ordinance to prohibit disorderly conduct in the city of San Marino. It does not define what is disorderly conduct. This is apparently up to the mayor, President Patton, up to our marshal. But if any of you get into disorderly conduct, be aware that such is prohibited in San Marino. I don't mean to pick on Mr. Huntington. I realize that many people in Los Angeles call him Mr. Moneybags from the way he pushes extra riders aboard his cars. We are trying to get the Huntington Drive line expanded from 2-track to 4-track, which will broaden it and still allow one lane down both sides, which should be ample for you autoists. With a 4-track system, of course, we will be able to run locals down the 2 side tracks, the outer tracks, and have express trolley service going down the middle. Mr. Huntington so far has refused, just as he has refused the unionization that came up 3 years ago, and his operations are not yet unionized, but they might be. The City Board of Trustees has also written Mr. Huntington asking him to refrain from ringing his bells on the crossings between the hours of 7 p.m. and 7 a.m. We understand the South Pasadena Board of Trustees agrees with the city of San Marino. So there has been a lot of progress that has been made, just as throughout our entire country. Here in San Marino, of course, most of you undoubtedly joined me in voting for William Howard Taft at last November's election. There were 97 votes from San Marino for Taft. 16 of you voted for, well, Teddy Roosevelt and his young friend Hiram Johnson, our governor. A few liberals of you always exist. There were no votes from San Marino in 1912 for President Wilson. but still we accept him and his very lovely wife, Ellen, that are now in the White House. He has some ideas that are a little questionable. We have this new income tax already. He is talking of establishing a central bank, a Federal Reserve Bank that Jackson had gotten rid of 85 years ago, and I can't imagine why we need it back again. And he is talking of direct election of senators, which could be hurtful for some of our bigger business people from California, such as the late Senator Stanford, who got elected through the state legislature. And this idea of having people vote for him seems a little outre. Of course, California, we had our new Constitution come in 2 years ago, written by Hiram Johnson. He calls himself a Republican, but you can tell he is far too liberal to be a Republican. He did put a few points in it, such as restricting properties. You will be pleased that in San Marino, as throughout the state of California, Orientals and other Asians are not allowed to own any property under our new state constitution. But there are a number of other parts of it that are questionable at best. There are 34 articles, 380 single-spaced pages in the new 1911 Constitution. One part that concerns me, and I'm sure most of you, is that starting this last year, we have permitted ladies to vote. We hope, of course, by giving them the vote, we will quiet them down. But
Mr. Veranda, I must interrupt at this moment.
this is Mrs. William Bortz. She has the vote now.
Really, Mr. Veranda, really. First of all, I must congratulate San Marino for taking a progressive stand against the demon rum in this city. There is now a movement to regulate the sale and manufacture of distilled liquors. This is a good first step. I have entered saloons with the admirable Miss Frances Willard, founder of the Women's Christian Temperance Union, and I have prayed with her for deliverance from this scourge of our families. However, Mr. Veranda, I must take exception to your dismissive comments about the new California Constitution granting women the right to vote. Quiet us down. I mean, really. This is a progressive age, ushered in by our own dear former President Theodore Roosevelt, and now adopted by President Woodrow Wilson. Might I remind you that at the first convention of the Progressive Party in Chicago last year, President Roosevelt argued for the elimination of child labor, a minimum wage, and workmen's compensation, all very, very important issues for us all. Furthermore, Mr. Roosevelt's name was placed in nomination by my dear friend, Jane Addams, founder of Hull House in Chicago and leader in the settlement house movement in this country. Following Miss Addams' lead, we women have successfully pressed for better schools. We have used our own resources to establish playgrounds in slums, daycare centers for the growing numbers of women with children who work outside the home. We have campaigned for the protection of women in factories. Had we only been heard earlier, the tragedy of the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire might not have occurred. We have worked to ensure the safety of food reaching our tables and the regulation of patent medicines, the high alcohol content of which has only addicted thousands of women who have been easy prey for those snake oil salesmen out there. I applaud California for joining the ranks of Wyoming, Utah, Colorado, and Idaho in extending the vote to women. Recently, Mrs. O.H.P. Belmont, a name known to all of us, a member of the New York Social Register, marched with 15,000 women up Fifth Avenue in New York in support of our cause. A crowd of over 500,000 people cheered, not jeered, the women on their march. Today, the daughter of Secretary of State Thomas Bayard was among those women sentenced to 60 days in the workhouse for exercising their right to free speech by picketing the White House. This is dismissive. This is unheard of, and Mr. Veranda is dismissive of our efforts. How can you dismiss this growing movement to right the wrongs of the past? You should embrace this late attempt to right such a great wrong and support votes and full participation for women at all levels of government. Really.
You have heard from Mrs. William Bortz. Be grateful you are not Mr. William Bortz. We already have much progress around us, not only having given women the vote. Yes, we have in San Marino officially by ordinance banned the manufacture of liquors. Our city attorney, however, for his $40 a month has agreed with everyone else that the manufacture, distribution, and sale of wines, which of course is still a big income here from Lake Vineyard, will continue in San Marino. I am proud to tell you the distribution of beer by wagons down from the brewery in Pasadena will continue. Package stores in Pasadena are still open, though we have no markets here. I'm sure that the citizens of San Marino would have no trouble to bringing liquor sales into this town also, despite Mrs. William Bortz's idea. We are linked to both Pasadena and Alhambra. Those of us living north of Huntington Drive can obtain telephone service now. There are over 20 phones north of Huntington Drive on the Colorado Exchange. Those of you south of Huntington, there are 14 homes now connected to the Alhambra Exchange. How much more progress can we have? Most all of us have our own wells. There is a new Sunny Slope water company opened this year, serving a few homes over in the far distant part of San Marino on the other side of Sierra Madre, just before the Rose Ranch that covers that east end where most of us do not go, because as you know, at the east end of San Marino and south of Huntington along the railroad tracks that cut between San Marino and San Gabriel border, there are some, shall we say, undesirables. There are some tramps and hobos living in that area. We, in the more comfortable part of San Marino, would prefer to keep them over there. The farming of Sunny Slope and the truck farming of the Rose family is very good. They have their market over there, as you know, of fresh produce at the Baldwin Estate. And we already have 2 banks in South Pasadena serving us, Security First National and also the First National Bank of South Pasadena. So obviously there is never need for more banking in the city of San Marino. We are also blessed to have a number of churches outside of the town, but available to us. There are 14 churches in South Pasadena, 28 in Pasadena, 9 in Alhambra, and blessedly no church in the city of San Marino. the noise on Sunday, the bells and all of that, we have declared illegal by city ordinance. Obviously, for $40 a month, our city attorney does not bother with the U.S. Constitution and the First Amendment. We have also outlawed in San Marino other public assemblies, particularly motion picture houses, because you know what goes on there. There are 3 motion picture palaces in Pasadena. I am told this week the production of Jack London's Seawolf is quite good, but a new picture that is showing at the Motion Picture House this week includes a fellow that has come over from England and dresses himself as a tramp with a little black hat and a cane. He has a brand new motion picture of himself as the little tramp. I'm not recommending you go there, but some of your children might be brave enough to go to a motion picture house and see Charles Chaplin. She talks of lack of progress. Where else can you go in less than a mile and catch a comfortable passenger train, either on the Southern Pacific line in Alhambra, or just go north here to the Santa Fe or the Union Pacific stations? You can take a Pullman car not only just to Los Angeles, but anywhere in these United States. We have such wonderful passenger service that we cherish, and surely American passenger service on rail will never disappear. We are so happy with what we have. I should point out that our new city library, which is open from 3 to 5 on Thursday afternoons, at the rented Mayberry House, it is served by our city clerk. The city clerk has been hired at $35 a month, so he would be less than our city attorney, but he is there every Thursday afternoon between 3 and 5 to receive your volunteer tax. There is a new book in the library that my children tell me is quite entertaining, about a young English lord who was abandoned in Africa among some apes and was raised by the apes. Edgar Rice Burroughs is moving out this way from his home in Chicago and promises more of these Tarzan adventures from his ranch over in the San Fernando Valley called Tarzana. Fortunately, we have all these cultural things without going to the extremes of the East Coast. More conservative San Marino, Pasadena, of course, has been alarmed at the pictures we have seen from the Armory show this year in New York, where they have these strange disfigured features on paintings that are supposed to be humans. And then some of you may have heard the horrible music, the cacophony of music that has come out in the new piece this year, the Rites of Spring, I think they call it. Fortunately, the Los Angeles Philharmonic, which is 20 years old, would never dream of playing such music out here. This is far more conservative and growing in industry. Henry Ford's Model T, this year he is beginning to produce them on a moving assembly line. Marvelous things. They are available from the 2 Ford dealers in Pasadena for $725 to $795. But are you aware we have 2 car manufacturers right here in Pasadena? I presume that would be all part of disorderly conduct. We never allow cars to be built in San Marino. But with all this progress, all this wonderful news, we cover everything in San Marino.
No, Ken, I've got to interrupt. You're almost out of time and you haven't covered everything.
Everything of importance.
No, you haven't covered sports in this town. We have, in this town in 1913, over 20 high school students. We don't have a high school. Our high school students can go to any school they want. Once in a while they go to Alhambra or up to Pasadena, but lately we have now 8 students over at South Pasadena High. It looks like that is attracting more of our students. I'm talking athletics now, so I'm only talking about boys. I don't think girls go on to high school. But if they went on to high school, they'd probably want to vote and all that sort of thing. But we now have kids at South Pasadena High. It's 1913. We have 4 of them on the football team. Now, South Pass started their football season in 1912, last year, and they went undefeated. However, they were disqualified in most of their games later when it turned out they had 3 firemen, a policeman, the local butcher and bartender playing on their team. This year, they've cleaned it up. Our kids are over there playing, and we have a good record. South Pasadena High defeated Caltech 14-0. We lost to the Occidental Frosh 7-0, but it's a good season, a 7-3 record for the year 1913. The football field is on Rollins Street on the south side of the campus over there, and they don't have a game announcer, but I may volunteer for that. Also, there's talk that if we don't get our own high school pretty soon, we may encourage a military academy to come here to San Marino. We understand there's a Colonel Veranda that is thinking of putting in a military school. We don't know if that'll happen. It'll probably be several years. So that gives us the story on sports. And we get our scores of all the FC games by telegraph here in San Marino. So now, Ken, we've covered that subject.
What we have given you is an update on what's around us in 1913. Everything we have said is on public record, except for the slight insinuations about Mr. Huntington. It is a fact that our city attorney is drawing the rather outrageous salary of $40 a month, which I think you might want to speak with President Patton and do something about. I would remind you that your voluntary tax checks, and for your property tax, just figure the value of your house at $2,000 or $3,000 times 50 cents per 100. They would appreciate your donations. At some point in the future, City Council may be forced to raise that to 60 or 70 cents a 100 unless you make your payments now. But fortunately, our homes are all under $1,000 and should pose us no problem whatsoever. This is an official report. I feel that undoubtedly Mrs. William Bortz will want to interrupt with more historical facts. So if you want to leave, you may, otherwise you'll have to listen to her again.
I'd like to thank everyone for being here tonight. I especially would like to thank Ken Veranda for putting together the presentation of San Marino 1913. And I truly believe that much of what he said, he really believes. And I'll be speaking to win before the night's over. I'd also like to thank Paul Crowley for his participation in it, because what's life without sports? It just doesn't happen without it. So Paul, thank you very much. And I'd like to turn the program back to Gene Dryden, our president.
I think we owe Ken another round of applause. Now, you may or may not know this, but before every meeting, we have a board meeting over in the living room over here in the next building. Ken
has generously let us use use Lincoln Hall every time for our meetings, and again, he provides cookies and in the back for you, and we can't thank him enough for that. All that he does for us. And again, thanks very much.
Mr. President, we hope that 90 years or so from now, the city might finally get around to a new community center.
Let me introduce a few people before we move on. We have a number of people that serve on the board, and I'd just like to recognize them. Vice President of Membership, Bill Ferry. And his wife, Emily, who is the recording secretary. And Ave, of course, is program chairman, and she does a marvelous job. And incidentally, our next program will be the fourth Monday in October, with the subject to be announced. Treasurer is Greg Thompson. Greg. Then Marlene Elliott serves as the alternate secretary because the ferries moved to Pennsylvania in about 2 weeks or so for the summer. And they come back at the end, and we send him the membership information by email, and so everything works out very easily. And then Jim Elliott is the curator of the Michael White Adobe. Jim? Paul Crowley, of course, is parliamentarian, and he keeps us on the straight and narrow. Marilyn Peck is concerned with artifacts and resources, all of the things we have in the Michael White Adobe. Judy Carter is librarian. Peggy Winkler is, and Ken Veranda, historians. The grapevine that comes out 4 times a year is put out by really Chris Datweiler and Gene Platts, who are the ones who put it together and get it printed and then get it out to you. We have a representative on the board. The city representative is Betty Brown. Project development, we'll tell you about that in a minute, is Dennis Neer. Shaheen Harapetian is our legal representative. Lori Barlow deals with architectural issues. We provide a scholarship to deserving students. These scholarships will be awarded. There are 2 scholarships that will be awarded on the 10th of June. 2 presentations, one here and then one at the high school. Katie Benton and Dorothy Olson are social chairman. Carolyn Waldo Holmstrom is communications. Marilyn Peck, incidentally, also takes care of the mural, if you recall, that's over in Stoneman, that she made sure was restored. John Holmstrom, incidentally, is the fellow who came up with all the golf pictures, or most of them, in our presentation a few months ago. Mary Payne and Peggy Winkler are concerned with docents, of which we have a number, and we're grateful for that. We have a number of other people that contribute, and we thank all of them, and we'd like to have all of you involved in contributing to the historical, to be active in it. We had have a gentleman here who talked about sports, but he was also president of this organization for 4 years. And Paul, if you'd come up, we have a little thing for you, and you have to open it.
I have to open it?
You have to open it. It's a computer. Yes, it's Palm Pilot and his email address.
I open things quickly. Wow. It's a gavel. It's beautiful. Thank you very much. In fact, I'm going to open it all the way. It looks so good. And, yeah. That is great. It even says something on it.
Is there an inscription on it?
There's an inscription, but I can't read it because I don't have my glasses. Thank you very much, Jane.
Thank you. We really need to thank Paul for all of the things he does around this town. One other point, there is going to be a Memorial Day service in Lacey Park at 9 a.m. next Monday morning at the flagpole, and I think all of you will enjoy it. Francis Barker is going to speak a little bit. You recall that he gave us an outstanding presentation of his days in the Philippines, and there will be a number of other people there as well. Two other things. One is, again, there are cookies and coffee in the back, and for those of you who would like to join who aren't members, there are some envelopes there and some copies of the Grapevine up in front. Thank you for coming. We'll see you in October.